Oh, you got that colored bullet, Casey. Oh, it's so hard.
You're gonna have to
so
deal with
hard.
it.
You don't appreciate what I do to edit this document. Now what are you going to do? Now how are you going to style that bullet? What are you going to do?
Nope. I'm just going to live with
Wait,
it.
how do you?
Casey doesn't know.
I don't know.
Neither do I. You're a Google Docs whiz, John.
I'm not a Google Docs whiz. What I am is I am a victim of decades of word processing programs that do not make this task easy. That's what I am.
Hey, so let's go into what I've decided to call Immersive Inlet. Let's just cruise right into Immersive Inlet. Yeah, you love it.
What?
You love it.
It used to be a corner. What happened?
No, because everyone uses a corner. I figured.
Well, you were copying everybody else.
Yes,
yeah.
and now I'm trying to branch out on my own.
Well, in the immersive world, there is no corner.
Yeah, well, and that is true. There's no corners in an immersive world, and thus it is an inlet.
We have no boundaries. No attachment to physical spaces whatsoever. We're just floating.
Except for where the video ends.
Right? Except
The fuzzy edge where the video ends because it's not 360.
Exactly. All right. So there is, as we record this, it is Wednesday, the 20th of May, 2026. On Friday will be the official debut of Real Madrid, The Weight of Greatness, which is a 20-minute documentary about I will call it soccer. You're going to have to deal with it. Soccer team / club, Real Madrid, which I presume is based in Spain or something. I don't even know. I don't know anything about soccer, but
Sounds like Ohio.
I did watch this 20-minute documentary, and I just wanted to briefly point out that I think it's worth noting whenever there's new immersive stuff, not only because it shows everyone the pace or lack thereof of immersive releases on Apple Vision Pro, but for the 6 of us that do have a Vision Pro, I thought it's worth mentioning for them as well. And what this is, like I said, a documentary about Real Madrid. I was speaking with a friend of mine, Justin, who said that this is very kind of timely because I guess Real Madrid is like imploding at the moment, and this was all filmed, I believe, late 2025. But they talk about, the team and how important it is and the history behind it. And a couple of things I wanted to call out as highlights. They did a lot of like moving the camera, but they are getting better at doing it very slowly. Still gives me a little bit of like, what's happening? But it's better than it used to be. Still a lot more cuts than I think they need. However, there was one time where the ball was like on the right side of my field of view, and it was kicked to the goal, which was on the left side of my field of view. And rather than whipping the camera around or like cutting to a different view, they just let you do the thing that you can do in a Vision Pro. I turned my head and watched the ball go by, which sounds silly, but a lot of these immersive things, they're like, cut. They're all these, I guess, sports directors or editors or what have you that are used to doing that all the time. At one point, they showed what I think was a sped up film, but it was so preposterous. I almost wonder if it was CGI in the sense of, in the scale of it all. But what apparently the stadium for Real Madrid, it has like a turf, all this grass, I almost said turf, the grass, I guess can get like sucked down into the basement of the stadium. And the mechanism to do this is ridiculously large. And they just sit you, I guess, on what I would call as an American football person, the 50-yard line or the midfield or whatever. And they let you look at this happening at probably like 10x speed. The scale of this, I cannot verbalize how big this was. And I think this is like such a great use of immersive video because you can look around and everywhere you look, you're seeing the entire pitch, field, whatever, like rising up what appeared to be like 100 feet, way more than seemed necessary, which is why, again, I'm wondering if this was like all faked and I'm just ignorant and don't realize it, but it was very, very cool. And I also enjoyed, and they've been doing this more and more in different videos, they showed a bunch of stills. And so it's like a dark room, like 2D stills, right? So it's a dark room that you're in, and they're showing a still dead center in your field of view, but they've done I forget the term for it on iOS, but the thing where they add depth to it. And remember, everything is 3D, right? So it looks like these are 3D stills. And the other thing I really enjoyed, I've said this in the past, is they have like light coming from over your right shoulder. So it looks like there's a projector over your right shoulder or something like that, which I thought was really neat. And then finally, because a lot of this was spoken, Spanish, I believe, they had subtitles, but what happens if you twist your head? Well, the subtitles were just a floating pane that followed your gaze, which I thought was really neat. But yeah, this is, even as someone who does not particularly care about soccer, this was very worth the 17 or 18 minutes of my time. And as someone who does love sports quite a lot, this is a great example or investigation. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Case study and how wonderful sports can be and how it can really bring a disparate group of people together. And I know that not everyone who listens to this program enjoys sports ball, but I do enjoy sports ball. And this was a great, makes you feel good, kind of gives you goosebumps about, all of these people are enjoying something together. And it was really fun. So Real Madrid, The Weight of Greatness, we will put a link in the show notes for the 6 of you that have a Vision Pro. You should check it out. I think it's worth your time. We have a new member special. I believe on the episode, I credited it to John, which was erroneous. It was actually Marco that brought this idea to us. So Marco, would you like to describe it?
Yeah, so it turns out there was this movie called Her a long time ago that everyone saw except me. And that alone isn't anything new. But then what happened is people kept talking about it over and over again. And then the world that we live in started getting more and more like what I thought the movie Her was about. And so I thought it would be a good idea for us to actually watch it. And so we did. And we talked about it. And I think it went pretty well.
Yeah. This is a 2013 movie with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. And it's all about falling in love with AI, basically. Which in 2013 was reasonably far-fetched, but in 2026, it's all too real. So I really think the movie was very good. It is not for youngsters, and we talk about that on the member special. But it is very
Viewer discretion is advised.
Viewer discretion is very much advised. It is a good movie, though, and I think the discussion was really interesting, like Marco said, and I really enjoyed it. So, John, anything to add?
It's very timely. Marco was good to think of it for us to talk about, and it's even more timely based on what we're going to talk about as the main topic of this show, as we'll see in a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely, if you haven't revisited the movie, if you saw it when it was released like I did and you just haven't thought about it since then, rewatch it, because you definitely look at it with different eyes today than you did in 2013.
Very much so. All right, let's do some follow-up as we always do. Let's talk cut, copy, and paste with files in the Finder. And the whole of the internet wrote to us to say, after you copy a file with Command-C in the Finder, you can press or use the key combination Command Option-V, which will move item here. This is in contrast with Command-V without the option, which will paste here. And so the internet wanted us to know that, and now we do.
But we did say that on the show, just to be fair. I know it went by quickly, but when Casey was reading like the question from the listener, the question contained that information by saying, I know you can do this and that or whatever, and Command Option V was in there. So just so you can't do Command X in current versions of macOS, but if you want to move a file using a tortured version of the cut, copy, and paste metaphor, you can do so. You just Command C to copy and Command Option V to move. I suggest not doing that. I am super against move commands because I feel like any bug during the process can leave you with a totally deleted file that you can't even get out of the trash, but people seem to like it. So if you want to do it, it's there for you.
Alrighty, John, can you refresh my memory, or perhaps you haven't talked about this, but refresh my memory with what's going on with your terminal and state restoration, please?
We, in fact, talked about it last episode, Casey.
Okay,
you were there.
I thought so, but, I never trust myself anymore.
Yeah, we're talking about like terminal emulators. It was like an Ask ATP question, what theme to use for your terminal emulators, and we all got into the whole thing of like trying different terminal apps and stuff, and I had mentioned that one of the things that frustrated me about Apple's terminal, which was the app that I continued to use despite many alternatives that I have tried over the years, is I've had sporadic luck with getting Apple's terminal to restore its state to the way I want it when I launched the app. I wanted to restore all my windows and all my tabs, because of course I do. And at various times, I've also gotten it to restore the current working directory of all the tabs to where they were when I quit terminal. But like that broke, or like it would work and then it would break, then it would work, then it would break, and it's currently in a broken period. And I was like, oh, I'm mentioning this because like third-party terminal applications do better in that sometimes because they have more sane preferences and it makes more sense to me. You can just say, yes, restore everything. And it's like, great, it works. But terminal settings are Byzantine and confusing. And so lots of people wrote in and said, you should try X, Y, and Z. A lot of people wrote in to say, here's what I do. But of course, all those people are using they're either using Bash, because Bash is an extremely popular shell and it used to be the default on macOS, or they'll say, do this, and it's with the current macOS default shell, which is ZSH. I don't use either one of those shells. None of those solutions are going to work for me. The shell scripting in my shell doesn't look like those shells. It's totally different. I use TCSH. It's super old. No one should ever use it. Do not. It's bad. It's old and it's bad.
It's like me using PHP.
Right. Why do I use it? Because it was the default shell on the first Unix system I used in 1993. That is the answer.
I remember that, you saying that. I really, truly do.
Yeah, that's what I use. But anyway, seeing people say, here's what I use in ZSH, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was part of the solution when I did this. And then, of course, I just Googled for, a TCSH version of the ZSH thing. Like, I'm sure there's an equivalent. And I found a web page, and it's like, yeah, you need to put this in one of your dot files. I go into my relevant dot file, and there is that code staring me in the face, which I'm sure I wrote 20 years ago in that exact spot. So, I had whatever that, it was like, I've got it. This is it. This is the solution. I'll just add this to it's already there. So that was a humbling experience, but that did get me on the trail. Like, well, why wasn't it working? Why was it working sporadically? It turns out at some point, I don't know, let's say in the past 5 years, I made some kind of edit to one of my dot files that was silently causing certain code in it not to run due to like a mismatched conditional thing somewhere in it. Because I had conditionals, and don't ask, it's complicated. Anyway, the code that I had there was correct, but it wasn't running, or wasn't running all the time, or it was only running in the first login shell. Anyway, it was complicated. But once I was on the trail, I figured it out. So I figured I would just at the very least document how, what I got to work here. Not that anyone out there is wondering, how do I get this worked in TCSH, but maybe this is just for me, so that when I look for it later, I'll find this ATP episode and the transcripts that we'll have by then. So here's the solution. That we'll put in the show notes the code that's it's not in my CSHRC, but anyway, if you put it in your CSHRC, TCSH reads the CSHRC. It's just a bunch of stuff that basically says, if you're in Apple Terminal, before each command, run this thing, and prints a bunch of VT100 escape sequences combined with some more modern stuff with a file URL and blah, blah, blah. That basically talks to the terminal and tells it what directory you're in so it can be restored. But and the interesting thing is, I believe, I'm not entirely sure about this, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the way the restoration works is that you tell Apple Terminal, restore the scroll back to what it was before. And when it restores the scroll back, because these escape codes are in the scroll back, they essentially change the current working directory, because they are text content in the scroll back that the terminal interprets as a please change to this directory thing. I think that's how it works. Anyway, the other part of it, and the part I struggled with the most, even after rediscovering this and even after fixing my dot files, was, what do I change all the stupid settings in Apple's terminal app to be? And so I'll put screenshots in the show notes of that. The answer is, even though the terminal application can do lots of fancy stuff related to window and tab titles, you don't want any of it. Uncheck everything. Uncheck the working directory or document or path in both the tab and the window. There's 2 separate tabs. There's the tab for tab, and there's the tab for window.
Gracious. And
there is a little thing, some blue text that says escape sequence, that even if you didn't know about this, has a little tooltip popover thing that explains, or tries to explain, does a bad job, but it tries to explain the escape sequences that you need to do. You guys can see that popover. If you read that, would that have helped you at all with this problem?
No, probably not.
No.
Like, in hindsight, now that if I look at my dot file, because I'm familiar with escape sequences from back in the day, like, I can see what they're getting at, but nobody who doesn't already know the answer is ever going to look at this popover and get it. But at the very least, you could copy and paste the text from the popover into Google and find better solutions. Anyway, that's how I got my stuff working the way I want it. And the way I want it, by the way, is this. I want my tab titles to be settable by me manually. I have a command line thing that will just set the tab title by printing an escape sequence, and never change. But I want the current working directory to be whatever it was when I quit the application. So if I have a tab title that says home, but I'm not in my home directory, doesn't matter. That's reminding me that this is the tab that is normally in my home directory, and I may have changed out of it, but now if I want to go back to where it should be, I will go back to the home directory and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's the way I want it. It's a weird way to want things. Most people want it so that when you change in directory, the tab title changes to reflect the directory you're in. I don't want that. So if you want that, you can achieve that with various settings. But I'm glad that I figured this out, and now I have documented it, at least in a podcast, so that when I forget this in 20 more years, and I'm still using Apple Terminal, I can look it up.
All right. And then with regard to terminal apps for macOS with text-based config files, I think you were lamenting this idea, if I'm not mistaken. I remember us talking about it.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
All right, but maybe it's not so bad. Tell me why.
Everyone said, hey, yeah, text-based config files can be confusing. To be clear, these are GUI Apple terminal applications for the Mac. They're GUI apps, but when you hit Command comma for preferences, it opens a text file in your text editor. And then, it's just like a config file. It's like, all right, well, you kind of just opted out of the whole GUI thing there. And people are like, no, it's not so bad. You just tell an LLM to set the configuration the way you want it. So you just basically decide, I want the cursor to be red. I want this, blah, blah, blah. And the LLMs, read the documentation and understand the config file and set it for you. And it's like, I would prefer to have checkboxes. Yes, that will sort of work. Although I can tell you that sometimes you just can't get what you want. Like lots of people were suggesting Ghost TTY, which I think installed that back when it was released. And I tried to get, that's another one of the applications that I tried to get to look like Apple Terminal, but I could not get the title bar to look right. So I'm like, all right, Claude and Codex, you take a crack at it. And they just told me to do things that I had already done that did not work. And so that was it for them. They could not help. It could be that you just can't configure it the way I want. But anyway, that's the suggestion. I think that is not the path forward for a good Mac application. Talk about Mac-ass applications, which we may someday talk about at length, maybe in a member special. This ain't it. Don't give me a text config file and tell me to use an LLM to set the preferences. You have to actually make a GUI for that, so I can click on little checkboxes and pop-up menus. You got to do it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just looking. I use Visual Studio Code for tracking what becomes the external show notes for the show, the things that are embedded in the RSS feed. And it used to be that when you hit Command Space, it would drop you in a text file, basically say go pound sand. But now there is a very not native but large and voluminous preferences window in here, so you can go and click checkboxes and so on and so forth. All right. We also got recommendations for fancy shell prompts, including Adam Brown, who suggested starship.rs, which I maybe I'm just a dummy, but I was failing to totally understand what the pitch is here. It seemed like it's like a Git aware thing that'll tell you what Git branch you're in and on what version, stuff like that. But I'm sure it's more than that.
Because you're so old. You don't do what the kids do, or maybe you do. Tell me about your prompt, Casey.
Oh, it's just the path and little else. I think actually Fish gives you what branch you're in if you're in a Git friendly or a Git aware subdirectory. But that's
first question about your prompt is you say, oh, it's just the path and little else. Am I to assume that path appears on the same line as your insertion point?
Yes.
Well, now you're an old man because that's not what the cool kids do.
Ah, my mistake.
They use multi-line prompts, which have existed for decades. And Starship.rs is a fancy way, that people have encapsulated, like, here's how to make a cool multi-line prompt that's aware of your Git repo and this and that and the other thing, right? And Starship is just sort of like, we've packaged that up for you so you don't have to, like, find tutorials and stuff like that. But the reason I noted it is here is because I go to these things and they're like, yeah, we've got this cool shell feature. Look at all these fancy smart completions for this thing or whatever. And they never work with anything except for Bash and maybe ZSH and Fish, right? This one actually says, oh yeah, and if you use TCSH, just do this. I'm like, are you kidding me? So kudos to the Starship people. I'm never going to use this because I am not a multi-line prompt person because I'm old. But if you like a multi-line prompt and you use ZSH, Bash, Fish, TCSH apparently, and who knows what else, maybe the corn shell with a K. Yeah, you should check it out. So I did not try it. I am not interested in it, but multi-line prompts are definitely a thing. And the whole point with multi-line prompt is your prompt can be as wide as your window because your insertion point is not there, and it can contain lots of fancy information. What branch am I in?
See. Mm-hmm.
What files have been modified? What's the current date and time? What is the uptime? What is the CPU? Like, people put so much stuff there. This one has like a special font that lets you put like your battery health in there, like a little battery symbol with a part of the battery to be filled. Like anyway. I thought it was neat, and I was excited that it used TCSH, so you can check that out.
I am so old looking at the features of this and seeing how far this is from my like default Bash shell prompt. Like, oh boy, this is.
I remember when people first started doing this several decades ago, when it became popular in my workplaces, where I'd go to someone's desk and they would have a multi-line prompt, and they're like, "It's so amazing! You can do." They were just like rolling their own in Bash or whatever. Like there was no packaged up stuff for it. I was like, nah, not interested. And I'm still not interested, but people love it, so.
I'm also very disappointed to learn now in Wikipedia that apparently Corn Shell has nothing to do with the band.
No, it does not. It predates them substantially.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right. And then continuing in the terminal in shell area, Derek wrote in to say, I just came across this explanation of the inner workings of the terminal, which is the terminal, the TTY, and the shell, which is in turn from the Linux field guide by Uros Popovich. And we will link all this in the show notes. And I know basically nothing about how all this works. So at some point when I have a minute, I'm going to be checking this out too.
Yeah, and I have a suggestion in that area, which is The Secret Rules of the Terminal by Julia Evans. It's one of her wizard zines. If you have never read wizard zines, it's wizardzines.com. You should check them out. It's basically, it's a reminder to me every time I see them go by, and I've purchased several of them. Every time I see them go by that basically people learn in different ways. And if you learn in the way that is catered to by wizard zines, it is just a godsend to you. So it's basically like, multi-panel comic strips telling you about technical details of, Unixy nerdy stuff, programming, parts of Unix, stuff like that. And it's not telling you like the basics. It's trying to get you at like to understand fundamentally how they work, and also to like demystify the technical nerdy inner workings. But of course, they're short comic strips, so it's not like pages and pages of text, so it can't go into a ton of detail. But that doesn't mean it's surface level. It goes deep on a few specific things and tries to describe them in casual ways. But the things it's describing are incredibly nitty gritty. So the secret rules of the terminal is like, hey, all that escape sequence stuff and the VT codes or whatever, it doesn't go into like an extensive 200-page history of it and where it came from and glass teletypes and blah, blah, blah. But it basically says there are mechanisms under there and here's how they work. And it gives you like practical advice, and it basically lets you to know where to look to find out more information. It lets you know what you don't know, and also sort of laser targets at a few specific things. So I think they're a great way if that's how you learn. If you're not one of those people who's like, I need top down, tell me just the broad strokes, or I need bottom up, start from the ones and zeros and the bits in the history. This is somewhere vaguely in the middle, and I find them fascinating. There's tons of them on tons of topics. There's a great one on DNS. There's ones on how Git works. Julie has also contributed to the Git, the actual official Git user manual, written substantial portions of it, I believe. So check out wizardzines.com if you haven't already there. These zines are well worth the money. You can find lots of free samples. She posts them herself on social media and stuff, and free samples on the pages. And you can learn a ton just by following her on social media. And by the way, this is not a sponsorship. She's not sponsoring this. This is entirely just because I think it's a cool thing. And it just so happened she recently wrote one about the exact weird nitty gritty terminal escape sequence. Like, what is the relationship between the terminal, the application Apple terminal, the shell, the TTY, what even is a TTY? Like when you hit Control C, what catches that keystroke and what chooses to take action on it? These are like terrifying questions if you ever ask them in an interview, because nobody knows this stuff anymore because it's so old and it's all so steeped in history. But this will give you a handle on some of it.
We are sponsored this episode by Cotypist. Cotypist is smart autocomplete for the Mac. It predicts your next words as you type in any app, and the AI runs entirely on your own machine. Now, I tried out Cotypist to do this ad, and I was blown away by a few things. First of all, I love the idea of a better autocomplete because it can save so much time and so much typing. Now, autocompletes in the past, I haven't used them that much because they usually are not predicting what I actually wanted to say. Cotypist is way smarter because it uses modern AI technologies, but it does it all locally on your Mac. So the suggestions are better than previous techniques, but also it's private. It's not sending your data to some cloud service, to some big model to be trained on or anything like that. It's all local, using the power of your Mac locally. So it's super private and it's super fast, and you're not hitting some token limits or anything like that. So here's how it works. You start typing and it suggests, and you can hit tab to accept its suggestion or not. And it just goes word by word. So if it's 4 words, you hit tab, 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 tab to accept the whole thing, and it's saving you all this time typing. Now, if you don't want to accept a word, you just start typing whatever you were going to type, and it in real time will update its suggestions based on what you're typing. So a lot of times you just type like the first letter or two of what you wanted, and it figures out, oh, you wanted this word instead, and it offers that up next. So you can hit tab and accept that. So it saves you tons of time. Check it out, because what you're getting is a faster version of you and what you're typing, not like AI garbage. It's actually what you are already writing, just faster. Get a free 30-day trial of Cotypist plus 25% off your first bill at cotypist.app/ATP. That's Cotypist spelled Cotypist. Cotypist.app/ATP. Thanks to Cotypist for sponsoring our show.
Then let's talk about Dropbox and other cloud, syncing providers and ignoring node modules. It seems like this is the story that never ends. We've been talking about it for years. Hunter Hillegas writes, Dropbox has a rule system that can be used to omit stuff like npm output, etc. We'll put a link in the show notes to their documentation about this. And from there, ignore rules will not apply to files already synced online. These files need to be manually removed from Dropbox.com. Cool.
Yeah, so I tried this. They basically say, make a text file in your Dropbox, and here's the format of the text. So I'm like, great, this is great. This will solve my problem, because it has like rules, kind of like get ignore rules, where you can basically say, hey, any directory that is named node_modules, no matter where it is, just ignore it. And so I did that, and I was like, oh, it didn't work. And then it said, oh, well, the rules won't apply if the file's already synced. I'm like, oh, maybe I have to go to Dropbox.com and like delete them. So because obviously they had previously synced. And I went to Dropbox.com and they weren't there. I'm like, well, but did it work? And so I kept doing a series of experiments. Basically, I would empty out a node modules directory, right? And when I emptied it out, rm minus rf, the contents of that directory, I would see in the little menu bar, like the Dropbox popover would be like spinning. And if you click on it, you'd see a progress bar where it's like syncing 8,500 files, right? And it would go, and this progress bar would go, and because I just deleted 8,500 files, and the progress bar would go and march along, and it would be like done. All right, good. Now I'll put these ignore rules in. I try like every possible variation. Maybe I don't understand the syntax. Maybe I should try every variation. Maybe I should try an absolute path. I just tried every possible ignore rule you could put for like totally Dropbox. You're going to totally ignore this directory. And then I would run npm install, and I would run npm install, and it would create 8,500 files, right? And Dropbox would show a progress bar syncing 8,000, but it wouldn't actually sync any of them. It would just show the progress bar, and I guess it would, for each file, it would say, oh, this file appeared. Oh, that's on my ignore list. Oh, this file appeared. Oh, that's on my ignore list. But it would still take time. It would still essentially delay the syncing of other files as it looked at each one of those files, presumably, drinking from the FS Events fire hose, and just say, gotta ignore this one, gotta ignore this one, gotta ignore. And it's like, that's not what I want, Dropbox. I want you to just not touch them at all, or at the very least, don't tie yourself up and don't show a and the progress bar was slow. It wasn't like the progress bar in zip. Now it's so much faster. Like, I timed the progress bar when I was ignoring them, when I was not ignoring them, and they weren't that different. Like, it was in the margin of error both directions, because they're small files and have a fast internet connection. So this is a super weird feature. Like, I left it in there. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I don't need them to actually be synced, but it's not solving my problem, which is when I do lots of activity in node modules, the actual files that I want to sync have to contend with the processing of the node module files, and that still seems to be the case. And I'm using the non-file provider version, so maybe it's different for file provider, but I have to give a thumb sideways to this feature from Dropbox.
Noted. Good to know. All right. And then speaking of Dropbox, you can also use, what is the correct verbal pronunciation for this thing, John?
Why don't you ask Marco? Enum. I say X-adders or extended attributes.
Zatras.
You can use Zatters or Shatters.
Zatterans.
And maybe it's Shatters. Anyways, you can use XATTRS. You can use those things to tell Dropbox that a file or folder should be ignored. Boz Bandalo writes, solving ignoring node modules and other folders from syncing on a Mac. And this is a Medium post. God help me, every time I open a Medium post, I get angry because of the stupid popovers and how hostile it is to reading, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, this post is actually pretty good and talks about how you can accomplish this using...
And of course, there's two sets of extended attributes, one for file provider and one for not file provider. And of course, you have to remember to set them on the files in the Dropbox. It's kind of like the time machine ignoring thing. You can set extended attributes on files to have time machine ignore them. So now you need some mechanism to make sure every time you make a new node modules directory, you always make sure you set the correct X-adder for your version of Dropbox on it, yada, yada. But just suffice it to say, you can do the X-adder approach or the Dropbox rules file thing.
All right. And then with regard to Time Machine, as we had just mentioned a moment ago, Paul Gallo writes, regarding John's issues with node modules and Time Machine, I found that switching to PNPM helped a lot. PNPM stores all package files in a single content addressable store on disk and hard links them into each project's node modules. So identical packages across projects only occupy space once. And this saves disk space and speeds up installs when packages are already in the store. For Time Machine specifically, the big win is that the project-level node modules folders shrink down to mostly symlinks. The store itself, it still gets backed up, but it's only a single directory. Also, PNPM recently introduced more reasonable defaults to protect against supply chain attacks.
This sounds very neat to me, but I'm always terrified of running anything other than the bog standard stuff in Node, so I didn't actually try it. But kudos to them for coming up with a cool way to make things faster and save space.
All right, moving completely sideways, the 20th anniversary iPhone's curved display is going to get better a year after the 20th anniversary iPhone is released, which this always cracks me up when we have news about like current iPhone plus 2 or 3 or whatever. But nevertheless, Tim Hardwick at Mac Rumors writes, Apple's already planning a second version of the, quote, 4-edge bending display that is rumored to debut on next year's 20th anniversary iPhone, claims a new report out of Korea. ET News reports that Apple's planning a 2-stage rollout for the new OLED display technology that the commemorative iPhone will use, with a more advanced version said to be coming a year later. For the 2027 variant, Apple will reportedly rely on OLED technology that uses a magnesium silver alloy in the cathode layer. This implementation can cause image distortion and brightness loss in curved areas, but Apple is apparently willing to live with the compromise for the 20th anniversary iPhone while more advanced technology scales. Apple then plans to address the issue in the 2028 iPhone by transitioning to next-generation transparent electrodes. Apple will reportedly switch to indium zinc oxide cathode materials, and because IZO is more transparent, it should reduce distortion, uneven brightness, and heat issues around the curved edges when enabling even narrower bezels.
So this is relevant to Marco wondering whether the 20th anniversary phone would be like the 20th anniversary Mac and be like a one-and-done special model, but if they're planning a second variant the next year, it seems like they're at the very least, if this rumor is to be believed, hoping that the curved screen is not a disaster and it turns out that people mostly like it and eventually all phones will look like that. But we'll see.
All right. So long time ago, I don't know, it was like 10, 15 episodes ago, Marco was talking about reminders and had some very reasonable gripes about it. I don't even remember what iOS version we were on. I think it was 26 dot something. And at the time, the whole of the internet, the same entire internet that spoke to us earlier, wrote in to ask if Marco had tried the alarm style reminders. And we'll put a link in the show notes to what exactly this means. This is a post from Mac Rumors that explains how you can set alarm style iPhone reminders in iOS 26.2. So, Marco, were you aware of this at the time or perhaps now? Have you messed with this?
At the time, I don't think I knew about it. I do know about it now, and I have messed with it because I am building an app that, at least so far for myself, but I will probably end up releasing it at some point. But I'm building an app called, tentatively, Reminder, that I've mentioned on the show before. And it reads and writes the reminders database. And what I wanted to make sure of, like, how much of the built-in reminders features am I covering, and how many of those features would my app either, have to re-implement to support them, or how many of those features are not even available in the API for me to detect or set. So therefore, will I clobber those features on those reminders if my app edits them? And the alarm reminder is one of the latter things where the reminders API does not contain anything about the alarm reminders whatsoever. If you edit those in the API, if you edit their alarm objects at all, those just get blown away. I have not used them, but except in testing. But I did find in testing, an alarm reminder is exactly what you think it is. It's a reminder that at a certain time makes the iPhone alarm function happen. So it'll break through Do Not Disturb. It'll make noise no matter what. It's that kind of thing. So I suppose there are reasons people would want that. It's a big world, but I can't imagine a reason why I would personally use that. I like reminders and I like alarms, and I think in my life those are two separate things. So I am now aware of these. My reminder app will not and cannot support them, and I don't really see a need for them myself. But I'm sure people like them.
Yeah, they were suggested to you because this was so long ago when you were talking about why am I making a reminders app for myself? Why am I unsatisfied with current solutions? And it was like, well, maybe this will solve the problem. I think you were talking about like how a reminder will come up and you'll dismiss it and then forget that it existed and everyone has suggested do and blah, blah, blah. And that's right around when alarm reminders are coming out then. And people were thinking this will solve your problem. Like these are harder to ignore because there are literally alarms, but you don't want it.
No, well, because the reality is, here's what I would do. I would hit OK or snooze. I would be angry because it made noise. And then I would forget it again. Now,
I think you have to swipe now, don't you? You can't just hit a button.
Yeah. Now they do when you test one of these out, it does have a different dismissal UI than a regular alarm does. It has like a live activity, and it's a whole thing. You have to tell it that it's done. So it is a little bit more involved. So I can see why people suggested it to me, but it's not for me.
All right. And then this all was spoken about a long time ago, like I said, but you were very confused, and justifiably.
Oh, no, I was not confused. I was angry.
Okay, fair. You were angry about the way that snoozing works in reminders. And Rob Howard wrote in to say...
the labels in particular. This is what drove me nuts. Because, so to recap, the problem was, I've been using reminders forever because that's how I get anything done. And the notifications for Apple reminders... would say things, it would be like 8 a.m. and I get a reminder and I would go to snooze and it would say, remind me this morning. It's 8 a.m. What? It is this morning. So it turns out those actually mapped to exact times. They just didn't want to say.
Exactly. So Rob Howard writes in, the snooze options and reminders are actually pretty consistent, but Apple being Apple, you have to figure it out for yourself. Remind me in the morning means it will go off at the next 9 a.m. Remind me in the afternoon means it will go off at the next 3 p.m. Remind me this evening means it will go off at the next 6 p.m. Remind me tomorrow will go off at the originally scheduled time, but tomorrow. So Rob writes, yes, this does mean if a reminder goes off at 2:57 p.m. and you say, remind me this afternoon, it will go off 3 minutes later.
Yeah.
Cool.
And can I just say, morning being 9 a.m. and afternoon being 3 p.m., you're California's showing, Apple.
Yeah, very true. All right. And then with iOS 6, why do I keep saying iOS 6? iOS 26.5. There we go. We got there, everyone. There were a bunch of changes around this, and Ryan Christoffel writes for 9to5Mac. As discovered by Aaron Paris, Apple's updated the language for its snoozing options in iOS 26.5 to make very clear what time a reminder will pop back up. For example, here are the snoozing options I saw this morning in iOS 26.5. Remind me in 1 hour, remind me at 3 p.m., or remind me tomorrow. Additionally, Ryan writes, the second option changes based on the time of day. So you'll see the 3 p.m. language change if it's not currently morning. Or, for example, in the evening, you'll see an option that snoozes until tomorrow at 9 a.m.
See, was that so hard, Apple? It only took, 5-6 years? I don't know how long these options have been this bad.
I think much longer.
It's been so long, and you just wonder, the original, they came up with this maybe in the first version of reminders that had this feature, and they said, well, what should the text say? And it's like, well, we don't want to be so precise, and people might be picky about it. So let's just say morning, afternoon, evening, and tomorrow, and we'll just pick times, and it will be fine. And how many years does it take of literally billions of people using this feature, and all of them having no idea what these things? No one would guess the behavior because the behavior is bad and doesn't make any sense. And you would think, after the years and years of confusion, they would why don't we just say when it's going to, we have limited options. Obviously, it might be better to have more flexible options. And I know there's a way to customize it. You can go into it there are, but we're going to give some quick options. Why don't we just say what they are? Remind me 1 hour. Remind me at 3 p.m. Remind me tomorrow at 9 a.m. See, was that so hard?
And by the way, look, I'm a very humble person. I'm taking full credit for this.
Yeah, we did a podcast, and then 2 weeks later, iOS 26.5 fixed it.
Well, because I've been complaining about this for months, and no, I've never heard anybody else complain about this, and I've complained about it very aggressively for the last couple of months.
I've complained about it within my household. That's for sure. Look, the whole world has been subject to these terrible labels forever. I'm sure people have complained about it just idly to themselves, but
yeah. But because this is my one of my reasons for making my own reminder app was that those snooze notification options drove me so nuts because I just never knew what they meant, and it would always seem it would be it would be 2:30 p.m. and it would say, remind me this afternoon. What does that mean? And it turns out it meant 3 p.m.
You have to pause and think about it. It just has it's like a thinking hitch,
Right, exactly. So I am still happy that I'm making my own reminding app because I'm finding lots of other nice little customizations that make my life, that make it work the way it fits me. And I don't know if anybody else will ever use this app. I do plan to release it, as I said, but I'm making it to fit me. And it's pretty opinionated in certain ways as a result, to surprise nobody. So we'll see about that. But anyway, I'm glad to see Apple is like kind of like swallowing a little bit of their like design purity pride and just giving us like concrete options that tell you times so that it's more predictable.
I don't think it's design purity. I think it's neglect. I think no one has even considered the badness that has existed for many years because it's just like, well, we're not working on that feature now. Why would I ever look at it or think about it? And like, I'm sure Apple employees were annoyed by it too, but it's like, well, that's not on the schedule. It's not what we're doing. It's not prioritized. And it just takes a certain amount of like, can we just actually get any human being ever to look at this and find the one obvious problem and fix it? And it's like, especially in this case, it's not just a matter of changing some strings, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge change. I mean, I know it's got to be localized and everything, but like on the scale of a company the size of Apple, I feel like this change did not need to wait the vast number of years that we had to wait for it.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, I think you're right. It is. I think it is most likely the result of neglect. But there's so many areas in the common system apps. Like I believe it was John Gruber was just talking about like how like the Contacts app is like so ancient and basic. But you look at all of Apple's built-in apps, like the ones that kind of have like not a lot of attention. Like Contacts is a great example. Certainly Reminders, Calendar, I would say. Notes seems to have a pretty good amount of effort, but like those other ones, it just seems like much of the time they have a staff of literally 0 people on them. Maybe as Apple is considering its certain leadership changes and restructurings and things, one thing I would love is just like a little bit more of an ability to multitask. And they already they have a lot of platforms, they have a lot of products. Like they're multitasking way better now than they used to, but there still seems like there's so many areas of their products and software that just go years with seemingly no one touching them. And we've actually heard from people inside that is literally the case, that like certain things have like literally no staff, or there's like one engineer who solely by themselves manages like 16 different system apps that are all...
That was my joke about Terminal having 0.15 people on it.
Right. Like we've heard multiple times over the years that is literally the situation for a lot of these apps, that there really isn't anybody working on them, because it seems like, for whatever reason, the internal structures, that is where the incentives, that's what they create. Is that kind of situation. And I would love for that to change over time. Because like imagine how much better the basic system apps like Reminders and Calendar and stuff like that. Like imagine how much better they could be if they had even one full-time person each. Because it seems like they don't.
Whose only job was to make that app better, and not by implementing the new feature of the month, not by adding AI to it, but instead, whatever the existing functionality is, find the parts of it that didn't work so well last year, fix the bugs, speed it up, blah, blah. And in this case, like in the case of Contacts on macOS, I almost wish there were 0 people on it, because whatever fraction of a person did mess with Contacts for Tahoe just made it worse. Like it's almost worse to like understaff it and then require them to make changes to like liquid glassify it. Like the Contacts app got worse in Tahoe. It is uglier, it is harder to use, and it has either the same number of features or fewer features depending on how you look at it. That's not good. Like it would have been better if they just left it untouched, but it would be even better if every year it got a little bit better. Like we like to, I mean, this is weird because I don't know the economics of everything works, but we like to think of like these apps like, well, if that was an indie app, the indie would be busting their butt every year to keep up with the OS changes and to implement new features and to fix bugs and to find the parts that their users are confused about and improve them and blah, blah, blah. If you had a solo indie developer for every app, would that break the bank at Apple? Because that's how we conceptualize it. But that's, as you just point out, Marco, that's not how they do it. They don't put one indie developer per small app on each OS. I guess because they just think that's a poor use of resources. And I would argue that it would be an amazing use of resources if everything got better everywhere, every year in small ways. And then you have a separate team on like, okay, well, the big feature this year is you got to do Apple Intelligence integration. That would be separate from the single indie app developer who's just there fixing bugs, improving performance, and finding the parts of the app that are confusing and making them less confusing.
Yeah, like, you look at something like I saw Flexibits, and who makes Fantastical, just celebrated, I believe, their 15th birthday. Look at something like Fantastical. It's like this amazing calendar app that was made, I don't know how big they are now, but certainly originally they were a pretty small company. I think it was like, just a few people. That's an amazing app tons of amazing features, loved by so many people, it really hits so many needs better than Apple's app. And that was made by like a few people, forever ago. I believe the same company. Don't they also make CardHop? Is that their contacts app?
I believe that's right.
Also, it's like a better contacts app. That's another big thing. Look at how many people make. Believe me, I'm finding. Just as a quick aside here, I've been trying to come up with a backup name for my Reminder app because I'm pretty sure Apple probably won't let me call it Reminder. Trying to come up with a name for a to-do app in the App Store in 2026.
There's only a few of them.
It is comical. Like every name is taken. Or I'll go down like a route in my head. I'll be like I was driving home the other day from picking up my kid, and let's see. What about an app that helps you remember? What animals help you remember? Oh, elephants. Oh, I just reinvented Evernote.
Yeah, no one's ever thought of that before.
Yeah, literally every idea I have, it leads me right into an app that already exists. Because as it turns out, there are many reminding and to-do and productivity apps.
You got to use the the passphrase password strategy and go with Crick's horse battery staple, because as you add more words, the combination becomes less and less likely to already exist.
I mean, honestly, that's what I'm going to have to do is some kind of just totally unrelated word or word pairing, one of those hipster brands like oak and moss or whatever, just something, just totally non sequitur words, because everything is taken.
Or you could go the Amazon approach and just put a random collection of consonants with nowhere near enough vowels in there and just go with that.
Yeah, all caps.
Mm-hmm. Or you could do the Alexa approach and just prefix everything with your name, Marco Reminders.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, anyway, that's I hope they just let me call it Reminder, because it's such a good name.
They won't.
No, they definitely won't. And they honestly probably shouldn't. But I understand why that's going to be challenged.
Also, you shouldn't call your app that either. That's also a bad name.
It's a terrible name, but also an amazing name, because that's what it does. It reminds you. It's a great name.
It really isn't, Marco. I love you. But
this is the reverse of the Aliens movie with the $sign for the S. You're just like, what if Reminders, but take off the S?
What if I make a magazine and call it The Magazine?
Drop the. It's cleaner, right? Or maybe that's the answer. The Reminders. That's what you got to do. The Reminders.
The Reminder. It's singular. I like that.
Actually, that's true. Yeah, The Reminder.
That sounds like a bad Jason Statham movie.
He doesn't track people down. He just sends people notifications.
Yeah. Do you want to be reminded again this afternoon?
Oh my gosh.
We are sponsored this episode by Claude. I've actually used Claude, I think, 7 or 8 times today so far. Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you, whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move. Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. So today, I was using Claude in a number of different ways. First, I was using Claude Code. Now, this is, look, you've probably heard about it already, let's be honest, but it runs in your terminal, it reads your code base, and it can take on tasks like writing tests, which I love because I don't want to write those myself, refactoring code, or here's what I use it for a lot, debugging. And you don't have to be hand-holding it and walking it through every step or copying things and pasting things back between different windows or everything. It's all right there working in your code with you. I have found Claude Code can really help me figure out edge case bugs on things. Like some algorithm I've written that I was trying to align the ad break detection for Overcast so the transcripts would line up with different ads inserted. I got the algorithm mostly right, but Claude Code found some edge cases and it fixed them for me. And I was able to review all the code it changed. It wasn't even that much code, but it's still, and it made a bunch of tests for me. It was amazing. I love using Claude Code for stuff like that because it's the debugging partner and the very diligent tester that I've never had. And it does it all for me. So I strongly recommend check out Claude. There's so much else you can do with it. That's just one example. There's so many great reasons to use Claude. So for problems worth solving, get started with Claude at claude.ai/ATP. That's claude.ai/ATP. And check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all the features that I mentioned, claude.ai/ATP. Thank you so much to Claude for helping me out and for sponsoring our show.
Hey, John, why does everyone hate AI?
This is a topic that The Verge has been covering a lot lately, and And they're covering it for a reason. Like it's in the zeitgeist. In particular, there's a couple of events that happened recently that are just adding on the pile here. But I thought we would just go through some of the bullet points. I will preface this by saying, we're going to talk about other people's opinions because this is a lot of like surveys and what other people, mostly Americans, think about it. Okay. And people have their reasons and they have their opinions or whatever. And you can't really argue with their opinions. It's what they think. It's interesting for us to talk about because we were like, why do we think they think that? And that's what I'm sure we'll discuss. But I would say for myself personally, I think there are a huge number of what I think are extremely valid reasons to hate AI. Despite what we all talk about, all the things that we like about it and the things that it's good at and the things people do. We just had the last episode of the overtime about non-app developers making apps, and we've got so much feedback from other people doing that. Like, just because good exists doesn't mean there's not also bad exists. And then the question is, okay, given the view of the world, like obviously the things that loom large in our mind as developers is like we're talking about development topics, which happens to be something that this AI technology is actually pretty good at. But that's not the only thing people are doing with AI. And then what about the people who aren't even using it at all, but just have an opinion on it based on what they experience in the world and hear about? So that's this broader topic. So I even though this is opinions of other people, and even though we have talked recently about the useful or fun things that we're doing with AI in the particular narrow realm of programming, which I think is, I don't know, maybe this is a narrow view because I'm just a developer. In my opinion, it's the thing that AI is the best at, like LLMs are the best at maybe, but maybe I'm wrong because I just have a narrow view. But either way, the world of AI is so much bigger and lots of people have negative opinions about it, as we'll see.
Righto. So Pew Research did a study and wrote a post about it, how Americans view AI and its impact on people and society. We'll put a link to this and a bunch of different graphs in the show notes. I'm going to read out some bullets that John has extracted from that post. 50% of U.S. adults are more concerned than excited about the increased use of AI in daily life. This is an increase which is up from 37 to 50 in 2021. So a lot more people are saying, I'm not so sure about this. Additionally, about half of U.S. adults say AI will worsen people's ability to think creatively and form meaningful relationships. And let me remind you about our member special. The vast majority of U.S. adults think it is important to be able to tell the difference between AI and human-generated content, but few feel confident that they can. When I was reading this and when I was preparing for the show this morning, I read that line and felt like, I don't think I'm terrible at figuring out what's AI and what's not, but I wouldn't say I feel particularly confident about it. So I'm right there with you.
And decreasingly confident as days pass.
Yeah, very much so.
Because it doesn't stay the same.
Yep, absolutely. All right. About half of U.S. adults are highly concerned that people's ability to do things on their own will get worse because of AI use. The majority of U.S. adults rate the risks of AI for society as high. Fewer rate the benefits of AI as high. And finally, from Pew, young adults are more likely than adults 65 and older to say they've heard about or interact regularly with AI.
So that makes sense, young people using it more. And again, these are just people's opinions. You don't know how informed their opinions are or what their opinions are based on, but this is just what they're thinking and feeling. They're thinking that it seems like it might cause people to be de-skilled is the word that they're throwing around these days for this. And that it's making things worse instead of better, and that the potential downsides are not as good as the potential upsides. And again, it's, if you were in this industry, which we are not really, it would be worth thinking about why people have these opinions, because part of the problem, part of the angle that The Verge has been taking on this is like, but they're wrong. They don't know X, Y, and Z. And it's like, it doesn't matter that they're wrong. Even if they are wrong, it matters that they think this, and they're thinking this for a reason. Like, they're not coming with these opinions out of thin air. They're just so consistent that there's something happening in their lives related to AI that is giving them these opinions in vast numbers. And it just gets worse. But anyway, with young people being more likely than older adults to say that they've heard about interact regularly with AI makes total sense. Like, yeah, young people are more hip to technology. I'm sure young people are probably much more into AI than older people. Well, they use it more, but...
Right. So The Verge, as you said, have been banging this drum for a while. And so a post from the end of April of this year, Janice Rose at The Verge writes, far from the stereotype of lazy young people looking for shortcuts, Gen Zers have had some of the loudest and most detailed objections to generative AI use. Their attitudes also reflect a much wider backlash against AI and the tech industry in general, which has recently resulted in a nonpartisan movement against data centers across the country and threatened both CEOs and politicians supportive of Silicon Valley's AI frenzy. According to a recent Harvard Gallup study, 74% of young adults surveyed in the United States said they use a chatbot at least once a month. At the same time, 79% of those surveyed by Gallup, quote, expressed concern that AI makes people lazier. And 65% said that using chatbots, quote, promotes instant gratification, not real understanding, and prevents people from engaging with ideas in a critical or meaningful way. And in a more recent Gallup poll, Gen Z's opinion of AI tools hit a new low. Only 18% now say they are hopeful about the technology, down from 27% last year. And only 22% say they are excited, down from 36%. The number of Gen Z workers who think AI's risks outweigh its benefits has also increased over the past year by 11 points to almost 50%.
I think the deltas are important here. This is from April 2026, this article. So it's not as if the headline here is young people are using AI more, they hate it more. Like AI use is increasing. Like we all see that young people are using it more than old people, and year over year, more young people are using it and they're using it more. And over 1 year gap, they went from 20% saying they're hopeful about the technology, which is already not great. That's last year. And then it goes down more to 18. Only 18% they're hopeful about the technology. These are rough numbers for the public perception of AI among the group that is you would think would be the most receptive to it, young people who are using it more than other people, but they super don't like it.
The fear that chatbot tools will lead to a permanent loss of critical thinking skills ranks high among the worries held by young people about the technology. It's also backed up by data. A recent study from the MIT Media Lab found that EEG scans of the human brain showed decreased activity in people who have been writing essays using AI tools. Other research has found that this process, known as cognitive offloading, has a wide range of negative impacts on humans, including diminishing people's skepticism and their ability to discern truth from deception, leading to heightened manipulation and weakened democratic decision-making processes. The fact that so many young people are well aware of these dangers, even as they make use of the tools, shows that they aren't buying the hype of AI boosters like OpenAI's Sam Altman. There's one other explanation for Gen Z's stance on AI tools that isn't measured in data points. AI use has become culturally toxic, and many young people, like their older counterparts, won't admit to using it out of social shame.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, speaking of Sam Altman and OpenAI, and we'll get to them, I'm sure, as we discuss this a little bit more, but like, for the people in the industry who are announcing products and giving speeches and doing interviews about their current technology and the promise of their future technology and everything, it's really easy for them to not have their finger on the pulse of what the world what impression the world is broadly getting from their tech. Because at this point in their growth, it's like, we need to get funding, we need to scale, we need to fiercely battle with our competitors, we got to have the best model, we got to add this feature, we got to do this thing. And it's easy for them to also focus on the realms where they've got customers, they're collecting money, people love it, like the coding agents and everything, and Anthropic and Claude Code and all their government contracts and the battles. There's so much for them to focus on. It's easy in this stage in their development to not really be thinking about, but what does everyone think of us? Because it's almost like not relevant to them, and they just assume, well, everyone loves technology, and like if old people are scared of it because they're like, oh no, it's gonna do something bad, it'll be fine. The young people will pick it up or whatever. But like, I feel like the older people and the industry people are failing to see what's happening, as evidenced by two coincidentally very recent events where some adults totally did not, as we say, read the room in a catastrophic way.
So 404 Media reported both of these stories on May 11. Speaking to graduates of the University of Central Florida, commencement speaker Gloria Caulfield, Vice President of Strategic Alliances at the Tavistock Group, told graduating humanities students that AI is the next industrial revolution, and was met with thousands of booing graduates.
So this is such a weird phenomenon. As far as I'm aware, this is not a hot button political issue where students arranged a protest because they knew the speaker was coming and was going to say this, and we're going to protest because they're talking about some selling arms to people or whatever, and they're going to protest against, right? It's not like we a group of students are against this thing. You invited a speaker who's about this thing, and they're going to come here. If you watch the video and listen to the audio, it seems to me to essentially be a mostly spontaneous thing where a couple of people who are against AI started booing and then everyone just joined in, but it's like, you know what? Yeah, screw AI. And this person, to be clear, I don't think they were an AI booster. They were just mentioning it offhand, but they're like, this is a thing I'm going to talk about. It's a new thing in technology. And these are graduating kids, and they're probably like, they didn't give it a second thought to their offhanded mention of AI as like, oh, it's an up and coming thing. Like, everyone agrees with that, right? And I'm giving a commencement address. Like, I don't think anyone would have flagged that as, are you sure you want to say this in your speech? Because it seems so undangerous to people who don't understand how AI is currently being perceived and received by the public. And so they get up in front of a bunch of students, and you can see the speaker, like, she's just did not expect this. And so I feel like it was a genuine response. It was essentially spontaneous. The booing grew because it tapped into something that people were feeling but not saying. And the speaker was like, what's going on? I didn't think this is not a controversial section of my talk.
Righto. And then, so again, that was on May 11. So May 17, former Google CEO Eric Schmidt was booed throughout his commencement speech at the University of Arizona for his praise of AI. This comes just a week after another commencement speaker who also mentioned AI was booed at a school in Florida. So
there's a lot of reasons to boo Eric Schmidt, to be fair. This is one where the guy's going to come and he's going to talk about AI. So maybe these people were prepared, and obviously they probably saw the video on the internet of the other person being booed. But the kids are like, yeah, we should do that. We should boo them because we want them to know we don't like what's going on. It's not, we are not hopeful about 18% of us are hopeful about the technology. That's a low percent. So don't talk about it. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to hear about your stupid AI, even though they're all using it and they realize it is like a thing, but they don't like it. They're not happy about it. And I think probably Eric Schmidt was surprised that he shouldn't have been, because again, there are many reasons to dislike him. So maybe he should have expected to be booed, but this was just such an amazing coincidence of events where I just went to my son's commencement address where there was no booing, by the way. But mentions of technology and things that got reactions from the crowd is a good way to gauge, how are the kids feeling about what the industry is doing? And they don't feel good about this.
Yeah, seemingly not. And then Joanna Stern has recently left the Wall Street Journal, is that right? Mm-hmm. And started The New Things. And there is a post about this that she put up today, as well as a YouTube video, which we will link in the show notes as well. And in there, she apparently talked, I don't know, John, you were the one who took a look at this. She talked to a recent UCF journalism grad, is that right?
Yeah, it was just like, let's grab one person who's a student who had recently graduated and talk to them about how they feel as AI to give like a human face to this type of opinion. You can watch it as like a YouTube short or whatever. This is just an excuse to link to Joanna Stern's new thing that you should subscribe to. The domain is thenewthings.com. I think the actual branding of the newsletter is New Things with Joanna Stern. But anyway, if you want to see what she's up to, you can subscribe to her newsletter. Again, not sponsored. I just think she's a fun person to watch and she makes fun content.
Additionally, there's things like the AI friend necklace on The Daily Show, which I haven't seen The Daily Show in a long time. I know their reporters are, obviously comedians and whatnot, but were the other two numbskulls on this, were those actors or are these real honest people?
That's great that you have to ask that. So
it was so unbelievable. I thought they were real people, and then it was so ridiculous. I was like, they must be actors.
So yeah, we talked about the friend necklace on a past episode, I believe. It's one of those like pendants that goes around your neck that's going to be like your AI friend. I'm pretty sure the people they're talking to are the actual, founders or whatever, or representatives of this company. And they're just, obviously, the comedy show, so they're making fun of them, saying, why don't you get a real friend and stuff like that. But the fact that you can make a comedy sketch out of this, obviously the product is ridiculous and these people should not have gone on the show, but they probably thought it was worthwhile for the free publicity, even though they're mercilessly ridiculed through the entire thing. But stuff like this, where there's some company that somehow got funding that thinks, your friend should be a thing that hangs around your neck and we're going to make that a product and make all these ads for it. And then they become comedy fodder on The Daily Show to just rip them a new one and say, let's laugh at these people. Now, that's not, again, people's opinion and what currently gets laughed at now doesn't necessarily say what things are going to be successful in the future. I'm sure you can find probably things specifically from The Daily Show where they took some new technology and made a very funny sketch about it, and that technology later went on to dominate the entire culture, and we all love it. But where we're at right now is get the startup founders on The Daily Show and mercilessly mock them for what we perceive to be their extremely silly product and their as you put noted, Casey, ridiculous statements about it, ridiculous overblown statements about it, because that's where we are in the hype cycle for this.
Yeah, this video was incredible in both excellent and not so excellent ways. Like, it was just astonishing. And then relevant, but tangentially related to all this, Americans really do not like AI data centers in their area. We can point to our friend Stephen Hackett about this, but there was a Gallup post that came out recently as well. Let me read from that. 7 in 10 Americans oppose constructing data centers for artificial intelligence in their local area, including nearly half, or 48%, who are strongly opposed. Barely a quarter favor these projects, with 7% strongly in favor. This March survey is the first time Gallup has asked about data center construction. In the same March survey, 53% of Americans say they oppose building a nuclear energy plant near their area, far less than the 71% opposed to data center construction. Said differently, people are more enthusiastic about nuclear energy than they are about data centers. Since Gallup first asked the nuclear power plant question in 2001, the high point in opposition has been 63%.
So they've been polling about power plants, not only back to 2001. That was what, 25 years? All right.
Yeah, exactly.
For 25 years, they've been polling about it. And the most opposition they've ever gotten in their 25 years of polling about nuclear power plants was 63% opposed. AI data centers are at 71% opposed. But if you give people a choice, would you rather have an AI data center built near you or a nuclear power plant? People are going with nuclear power plant. And I know that's weird for the rest of the world because the rest of the world has nuclear power and we basically abandoned it after 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and everything, and setting aside again, reality versus perception. The perception in this country was no thanks to nuclear power. And so I think after like 3 Mile Island, something like 100 in progress nuclear power plants in the United States were just basically canceled because it was essentially public sentiment was like, I don't care about the facts. I don't care about how much you tell me about how safe it is. No, I don't want it. And data centers, as far as I know, have not sprayed radiation anywhere now, although maybe the one near Stephen Hackett is. Because that's run by Elon, but
yeah, maybe not radiation, but it's certainly they're certainly causing a lot of pollution as they burn a whole bunch of natural gas to get quick power.
Yeah, and dirtying the water and taking resources and stuff like that, right? But yeah, people don't want, and you could chalk this up to like NIMBYism, which if people aren't familiar with the phrase, is not in my backyard-ism, where it's like, oh, I'm fine with whatever, but I don't want it in my backyard. I want it somewhere else. Like everyone likes the idea that you have garbage pickup and people come to your house and take your garbage away, but they don't want where their garbage goes to be next to their house. They want it to be out of sight, out of mind. And so maybe people would be okay with the idea of data centers could exist somewhere, but when it comes time to build one near their house, they're like, no. And again, for lots of really good reasons. Like Marco pointed out, a lot of them are being built hastily with, I don't know if it's just the Elon Musk one, so that's what we hear about because of Stephen Hackett. Like, we're going to build this huge data center. To get enough power for it, we're just going to install a bunch of essentially like, I just think of it as like outdoor grills, but like basically like natural gas burning engine generators. Yep. And we'll just install dozens of them and just pump natural gas into them and spew into the atmosphere all of their exhaust to generate the energy that we need for our data centers. And there's all these rules like, well, you can't do that there. You have to have a permit for this and you have to have an environmental impact study and you have to have this and you have to have that. And Elon says, what if I just do it? And what if I just pay off all the local politicians so they let me do it? And that's bad. And then there's the noise of the generators and the noise that you think a data center doesn't make any noise, not when it has all those things, so, and the water pollution and everything else. So yeah. And I do wonder, like this was something Ben Thompson said when they were discussing this topic. He's like, well, if we told them the data center was for Netflix, people would not be opposed to it or not be as opposed to it because people like Netflix and they have a positive opinion of Netflix and a negative opinion of AI. But I don't think anyone would really want a Netflix data center near them either if it was behaving in the same way as the AI data centers in terms of noise, pollution, and all that other stuff. And because our government is bought and sold because of our terrible system of government has led to a system of government where if you have a lot of money, you can pay off local politicians to ignore the people and instead just say, well, they're just going to give us so much money and they're going to help me specifically get a lot of money. And with this money, I can convince you to keep reelecting me because money equals my ability to convince you to keep reelecting me. And there's an infinite supply of money going in here. So I actually don't care that you can't get drinking water out of your faucets anymore. And I don't care that you can't sleep because of the noise. And I don't care that they're spewing pollution. And I don't care that we have rules against it. Money. So that's kind of the situation we're in with the data centers. And does that make people like AI more? No, it does not.
Yeah, I think the energy question is obviously the biggest one because the AI data centers are basically limited by only two major resources: NVIDIA chips and energy. And the more energy they can burn, the more capacity they can have, and the more money they can make. So I think in the long term, what we've done is we've created a very strong financial incentive to make cheaper energy. And what's amazing cheap energy? Renewables, solar and wind. It's really, really cheap, especially over time. And it has a very, very, very low carbon footprint compared to almost everything else that we could possibly come up with. And it doesn't have the risk of radiation and meltdowns like nuclear and having to deal with waste and having to buy all of our fuel from Russia and things like that. And so there's all sorts of amazing benefits and huge incentives to get lots of solar and wind built for data centers. And in the long run, that is probably happening. But in the short term, they're impatient and greedy, and they're just burning a whole bunch of natural gas. So they're not doing any favors for our carbon footprint. They're not doing any favors from the environment. They're not doing any favors for trying to get ourselves off of fossil fuels over time. Like, it's just it's a nightmare right now in the short term. I hope the long term goes towards renewables because it just makes a ton of financial sense long term. But short term, we're not seeing that to the scale that we should be seeing it yet.
Yeah, if our government system actually reflected the will of the people, this would be, like, logically speaking, this would be the absolute perfect opportunity for every local municipality where someone wants to build a data center to say, sure, you can build any data center you want. It's got to be 100% powered by solar and wind, renewable, non-polluting things. But we'll just pass a law that says that. If you want to make a data center here, we're fine. This is the rules. You can't take any of our water beyond what limits we set. You can't. The only energy you're allowed to use is solar and batteries and wind and whatever other things. Like, you can make the rules for it, right? And it's like, wouldn't that be, because you want, like, we want the financial, we want the tax base. Like, there's all these reasons where, like, it's not entirely bad to have a big new industry in your area, although data centers do not employ a lot of people, and there are a lot of other ancillary downsides or whatever. So, like, balance the equation, right? If the people were given a chance to vote on something like this and actually elect representatives that reflected their will, you would never let them, like, oh yeah, just do whatever you want, set up as many polluting gas generators that are already against the law, and just do it, and promise that you're going to, like, currently Stephen's talking about the water treatment plant, like, oh, we're going to use water, but we're going to install a water treatment plant and blah, 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 but just don't do it because nobody can stop you, right? Because there's a disconnect between the obvious win, which you're talking about, Marco, which is like, this is a thing that doesn't exist yet. I know it's so hard to convert things that are currently using fossil fuels to renewables, which we should be doing anyway. But of course, our actual current federal government is vehemently opposed to that and is outlawing and adding fees to all renewable energy and paying companies to not build wind turbines. We're all screwed over here. But anyway, local governments, like this, you have them over a barrel. They have to build it somewhere. And if everybody is against it, require them to be clean, renewable energy. Like, there's, like, it's so mind-boggling. But of course, that's not how it works. How it works is, money talks and the will of the people walks. And so they just, and the other thing that Ben came up with was, like, what if they just said they would give everyone who lives near the data center money, a cut of the revenue or profit or whatever going through the data centers to just pay them off. And Gruber linked to the, like, Alaska, the U.S. state of Alaska has this thing where oil revenues are shared with the citizens every year from some long ago agreement. So every resident of Alaska gets like $1,500 every year as, like, their cut of, like, allowing the oil industry to be in Alaska. And so if you're going to build an AI data center and people in the town are, like, going to try to vote it down or whatever, what if you just told them every one of them will get $1,000 check every year for the thing or whatever? And that is, like, it kind of reminds me of people, like, selling their organs when they're desperate for money. You can pay people to do things that are not in their own interest. Like, that's one of the most sort of, like, devious and not very nice things to do, because if you offer the entire population, you'll all get $1,000, and in exchange they all get cancer and die in 15 years, they'll all take it. But it's not the right thing to do. Like, it is the worst. But, like, I am not in favor of, hey, just offer people cash to do a thing that's going to harm them, because people will make the wrong choice. And it's like, oh, it's paternalistic. Just let them choose what they want. But, like, that's not that kind of incentive is bad. It's the same reason you can't pay someone to vote for someone else. Like, why not just allow it? I'm sure in a few years we'll be allowing that too. But I believe it is currently illegal to pay someone to vote for a particular politician, right?
Yes.
Because if they could, it would be a much more efficient use of all the money they funnel. They would just pay everybody to vote for who they wanted, right? But this is basically the same thing. Like, we'll just give you money, and everyone just wants, I just need to pay my bill. That $1,000 check that I'm going to get today, it's all I care about. I don't care that, this is going to pollute the water or do some other harmful thing that's going to harm me 20 years, because that's just not how people think. So I think that's a terrible solution. And I think the actual solution is the people who are supposedly self-governing, who like vote for what they want, don't let people build data centers that do bad things. Force them. You have to do X, Y, and Z. You can't make this amount of noise. You can't do this. You can't do that. And if they don't want to build there, have them go somewhere else. And the somewhere else will also be populated by people who also don't want their houses to be polluted and have noise and all that other stuff. So this is just another highlight area of our dysfunction. And I have to think that, because there's this huge boom in data centers, and I think there's an article, I forget how I have a link to it, but there's also like the speculative boom of phantom data centers where people get in line with like the regulating bodies to like pre-purchase the right to make a data center. So they're next in line to get the electric company's electricity for their data center. And they don't know if that data center will ever be built, but it's important enough to sort of save their spot in line at the cost of a few $1 million just in case it gets built. So the boom looks bigger than it is because it's just like a speculative market on potential. That it's all just signs of a bubble, like all the stuff going on. But either way, there's definitely a lot of activity here. But how many people in the US live near a new potential AI data center versus how many people in the US have experienced AI in any form? And so I do feel like the data center thing, although people are very opposed to it for lots of good reasons, is just a tiny fraction of the larger anti-AI sentiment. And I think it's worth thinking about and discussing, why does everyone have such a negative opinion? I think most of it probably not based on experience, but based on what they hear or what they like feel. Why is everyone upset about AI, especially the people who have never actually used it in any appreciable amount?
I mean, it represents a lot of unpleasantness, a lot of discomfort, a lot of threats to people's livelihood, a lot of theft of what people have made. I mean, there's so many reasons. I mean, like for obviously, like, those of you out there who hate AI are very aware that I tend to use it a decent amount. I'm not an AI hater at all. But that does not come for free. In the same way that, like, I eat meat, but there's a lot of ugliness in the system that brings me meat, and I kind of, I'm accepting that by eating meat. But I also know maybe I shouldn't do a whole lot of that, or maybe I'm better off not knowing some of the details. That's kind of how my use of AI is. It's like, well, I'm choosing. It's a bunch of trade-offs. I'm choosing to use it. Despite some of its kind of ugly realities of how it came to be, because I think it does provide value. I'm willing to accept those downsides. But, look at what we were just talking about, energy generation. We accept similar trade-offs there. For most people, at least some portion of the energy that you use or cause to be used is generated in polluting ways, fossil fuels, carbon generation, possibly poisoning groundwater at some point. Like, so across all of modern life, we have to kind of make those decisions of like, all right, we're going to choose to use something for the value it provides us or for the needs that we have, even if it has negative downsides. And that can be from all the way from choosing which food to eat, choosing what stores to buy things from, choosing how to get from place to place, all the way up to whether we use AI and how much and in what contexts. There's a lot of unpleasant realities to it, and different people are going to draw those lines in different places. In the exact same way that different people draw those lines differently for things like whether they eat meat and whether they drive everywhere and stuff like that. Like, we're all going to have different tolerances for that. We're all going to have different priorities, and we're going to have different options. For a lot of people, using AI tech is amazingly enabling. It has massive upsides in lots of ways for things like learning new languages or operating in an environment where the language is not your primary or first language. There's lots of accessibility, amazing benefits to AI tech. Like, so many blind people are finding that the Meta Ray-Ban glasses with the cameras in them are amazing because they describe the world around them while keeping their hands free. Because blind people often will have a cane or a dog in one or both of their hands. So hands-free glasses that describe the world to them using AI are life-changing. There's all sorts of amazing uses of AI. Many things that we didn't necessarily call AI in the past are also made better by it. So, for instance, like dictation, like the whole Overcast whole transcript thing, it uses a model on the phones that is, by most accounts, an AI model, although it's a pretty small one. It's because it runs locally. But the year before that was announced, it was called machine learning. But AI, quote AI, took this feature that we already had and made it a lot better. So there's all sorts of things like that. If one of our sponsors this episode is an AI app that helps you type with autocomplete style suggestions that runs entirely locally on your Mac. There's all sorts of versions of quote AI out there, and I think they have different downsides and different impacts and different kind of bitter pills you have to swallow. Obviously, the major flagship models that are running in giant data centers and those data centers are powered by natural gas that's polluting Tennessee, that's pretty bad. But when you scale it down, it seems like it's a lot less bad. And so I think everybody has to kind of figure out where they land on that. How much of that kind of externalized badness are they willing to tolerate, and for what benefits to them or the world? And that's a tough question.
My read on these, and again, this is just based on my interaction with regular people and how much they seem to actually know about AI, is that a lot of the reasons that a lot of the problems that I see with AI, a lot of things that we've discussed in the show are not in the minds of these people at all. You hit on some things that are in their minds, but also you hit on a bunch of stuff that I just never see reflected in opinion polls for regular people outside the tech sphere. For example, helping themselves to all the world's data to train their models. We've talked about that endlessly on this show. That is not seemingly in the public consciousness. It's in the tech nerd consciousness. It's in the content creator consciousness. I don't see it in any of these things. It is not if you're going to do a survey of US adults, it's just not going to come up in an appreciable percentage because only I feel like tech nerds, content creators, and maybe lawyers have any interest in that. But it is a huge thing that is, again, still mostly unresolved in this country, and many lawsuits continue to wind their way through. Doesn't come up, right? The data center stuff, people who are near data centers sure super duper hate it, but there's so few of them compared to the hundreds of millions of people who live in the US. I feel like that's still got to be a small percentage. The good things that you all talked about, some people probably don't even know about half of those good things, because why would they? If you're not super into the tech and keeping up with the latest stuff, you'll only know about it when it reaches the public consciousness, or if you know someone who is vision impaired who's using the meta, you know what I mean? But we know about this stuff because it's tech nerd stuff and we're thinking about it, but it's not offsetting most people's opinion about these things. And so I'm looking at this and I'm always thinking what is it that they don't like? And the things that they list here, that I pull out these bullet points and there are a few other ones, but I feel like it's the biggest one for me has got to be AI is going to take my jobs, because everybody cares about having a job, and whether it's going to take their job or not, that is in the air. And it's not in the air for the hell of it. The people who run the AI companies cannot shut their mouths about how many jobs AI is going to replace. And I'm going to say that's not a winning message.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, setting aside whether it will actually happen or not, or whether it is happening or whether people are just using it for cover. There's lots of things everyone's doing layoffs and they'll just say it's because AI is replacing the jobs because it's the current cover for it, but they were going to do those layoffs anyway because they overhired during COVID-19 lockdown. And there's all this BS, but it doesn't matter. The point is, I feel like that's got to be in the top handful of reasons why people don't like it, because whether they know anything about it or not, whether they use it or not, whether they think it's useful for them, no matter what they say. But also, like you said, Marco, I'm afraid. I'm afraid for my job. I don't know what this means for me. What does this mean for me, for my job, for my career, for my literal entire career? And you don't have to be a programmer to do that. No matter what your job is, someone somewhere has said something that has filtered to you, or you've seen some news story that's I'm going to lose my job. So, and I just, and then so getting to the executives who are out there saying, because when they're saying this, again, they're not talking to the American people, as we would say. Who they're talking to are VCs, tech nerds, and utilitarian techno-futurists who don't care if the world burns and just want to make money or whatever. That's why they're saying it. They're not saying it because they don't know people won't like it. They say, I'm not talking to you, American people. I'm talking to the next people who want to invest in us, because executives love the idea of we have to pay for all these employees. Can we fire them all and not have to pay them and still do the stuff if we pay you a fraction of that? And the AI executives are like, totally, yeah. In the future, you'll be able to fire all your. I mean, that was the whole pitch for self-driving cars. Uber was like, yes, we won't have to pay drivers anymore. The cars will drive themselves. We're going to save so much money. Maybe we'll even be profitable someday.
Think of all the people we can help you fire.
Right. And who is the audience for that message? It's not the Uber drivers. They don't want to hear that. It's the executives at Uber, right? Or the people who are investing in Uber. And so there's this little world where they're talking to each other and saying things that they're just talking to each other, but it's so big, the rest of the world overhears them and they say, wait, what? It filters down to them eventually. And what they hear is not encouraging. And then of course, the young people are they're using it to cheat on their homework. They're being forced to use it in their first jobs. And they're like, is this going to replace my job? I don't like using it in this way. I don't like that people cheat on their homework with it. I don't like using it to write, which is the analogy I always tell my kids, which I heard online somewhere, and I probably repeated on this show, is that using AI to write something for you is like sending a robot to the gym to lift weights for you. It's missing the point entirely. Especially for school assignments, it's yeah, I go to the gym and work out every week. So yeah, I send my robot there and he lifts weights every week. It's totally missing the point. Anyway, people don't, and they're afraid, am I going to lose the ability to, everyone, am I going to lose this ability, whether or not this is a real thing, because whatever, people are studying it, they'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah. And this probably has analogs and fast, setting aside what the reality is, people feel like I have a skill. You're telling me I can use this to not have to use my skill anymore. My skill will atrophy. And it's infantilizing, and they don't feel that I'll pick up another skill. And it's and they look over at that other skill and some executive is saying, yeah, our thing is going to do that too. And it's well, then what the hell? Right. And then I think the other thing that maybe this is getting more into tech sphere, but maybe not based on the recent OpenAI versus Elon stupid trial of their little slap fight that they were having about whatever. Here's the thing about the prominent executives in the AI industry. Elon Musk being just prominent jerk in our country, in our world, right? Sam Altman, Dario, what's his face in
Amadei,
in Anthropic. None of these people, I feel inspire the general public in literally any way. And in the trial versus OpenAI and Elon, they were having trouble finding jury members who didn't already hate Elon. And this is just a jury pool. This is not tech nerds. This is not people who have a grudge against Elon. This is just the pool of jurors. And everybody they were getting was they all come in with established opinions about Elon and they hate him. And it was tough to pick the jury. And I think the judge was at some point says, look, you can't exclude people because they don't like him, because we'll never fill the jury. People don't like you for a reason. It is what it is, right? And all these executives, to the degree that they're in the public consciousness at all, they seem to have nothing to offer. They don't produce things that the public really wants. You made Steve Jobs makes the iPod and the iPhone. Eventually, people didn't notice when Steve Jobs announced the iPod, but eventually lots of people had iPods and they like them. And so that's the iPod guy. I have an iPod. I like the iPod, and there's a new iPod and it's even better. You get a positive opinion about this Steve Jobs guy that you're hearing about because you put in the file card in your head, Steve Jobs iPod. I like iPod. There's nothing like that for even the people who use ChatGPT all the time. It's a technology where it's hey peons, have the free version of ChatGPT. It's okay, but obviously all we care about are the ones that we get to charge people a lot of money and coding models, and you don't care about that. And then there's all the negative stories about that and all the negative aspects of cheating on homework and having things written for you and taking your job. So even that product that thousands and millions and millions of people are using, I don't think they're coming away from it with the same positive vibes that they get from an iPod. And so all these executives, they're not talking to me. They're not inspiring people. In fact, some of them are really terrible people. And even the ones that aren't terrible are just Sam Altman, whether or not he's a terrible person, does not come across well in any events that have happened in his life in any capacity, working or personal, in the past many years. I just feel and I don't want to dwell too far into the executives, but I just I always wonder when I see these trials and these people, I don't want to get into it was the Elon Musk suing because he's sad about that he didn't get to control OpenAI, and the thing got thrown out because of statute of limitations or whatever. But during that trial, they had all this discovery, and you hear all these interactions of all these people, and they just all sound like the worst people, like the worst people you've ever worked with. Like, they're dishonest, shallow, stupid. They don't seem to have, it's like it makes you wonder, like, wait, why are you in charge of anything? Why are you rich? Why? Because if you talk to Steve Jobs, you'd be like, this guy seems to have a passion for technology. He seems to have good taste, as evidenced by the things that he says yes and no to. He's very enthusiastic about the next whatever he's introducing, and you just don't see any of that in any of these people. I mean, Elon is just he doesn't care about anything. He's just a nihilistic, walking raw nerve of id or whatever.
I think what you're looking for, John, is colossal piece of shit.
Yeah, but he's just a bad person just in general. But then Sam Altman, it's so is he super knowledgeable about AI? No, not really. Does he have any particular insights about the future or the present? Not really. Does he have any particular skills in this area? Not really. Is he particularly charismatic and people hear him speak and are inspired? No, not at all. Does he have integrity? And I don't know, absolutely not. None of that, right? It's just what is there to make people the ambient sort of AI I don't want to use radiation, but the ambient AI atmosphere. If you're not into technology and you're not really paying attention, but things about AI touch your life from mass media and your personal interaction with things, what is there to give you a positive impression? So I am not surprised that everybody hates it. And I think it's a reflective of the state we're in, where nobody cares that they don't like it, because it's until the bubble bursts, or until we have consolidation, or until a winner is declared, we don't really have to pay too much attention to what people think of us, because we've captured the government, because they'll do what we want, and it's a corrupt state, and we don't have to worry about local regulations, and we don't have to care about what people think of our things until and unless the top companies are at each other's throat and some winner emerges, and then maybe someday someone has to make a profit on something, and we'll all figure it out and it will all come out in the wash. But by that point, all the people at the top of all these things will be rich and moved on to other things. And I feel like that's where we are, which is an industry with tons of money, and we think tons of potential in certain areas, that nevertheless has huge downsides and negative externalities that either people don't know about or don't care about, or they're just, pushing off into the future and saying, la, 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 we're not going to worry about that now. I'm sure it will sort itself out. And it's a sad state of affairs. I'm glad The Verge did this story, because it definitely tapped into something that I had been thinking about this, which is in my personal life, using these coding models to do things, despite all I know about the negative parts of it, I can see the promise of that technology. It's so clear to anyone well-versed in the art of programming, the promise of that technology, and also the concern about it, worrying about taking people's jobs and what does this mean for the future of people's jobs. But that is such a tiny corner of the world of AI. It might as well and I think if I was these companies, I would just concentrate entirely on that corner, because it's the proven thing that works and people will pay for it. But whatever, I'm not an executive. But the whole rest of the world is I don't care about coding model. They don't even know that people are using it for that. They just assume AI does everything, and they don't like it. And I didn't even touch on the whole fake images and fake video and how people are upset about that. And it's just, I don't know. Reading this whole thing has made me depressed, not because I think the technology is hopeless or cannot do anything, but because the way the technology is being used by the people who control it has so far been really, really bad. And Apple, its use of technology, of this particular technology, has been, they're doing a poor job too, but for different reasons. But at the very least, the things that Apple is doing, I don't think thus far are contributing to the negative impression, other than them advertising features that didn't exist, obviously. But everybody else, all the big players, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta with its stuff, are just making things worse every single day. And I don't see how they're going to turn that around until and unless there's some winner emerges and that company is forced to try to be a real business.
We are sponsored this episode by DeleteMe. DeleteMe makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data from hundreds of data broker websites at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. So there's the data brokers out there. These are these sites that when you search a search engine for somebody's name, they're the ones that all advertise, hey, you want to get their home phone number, their cell phone number, their address, their relatives' names? Those are data brokers. They collect as much info on as many people as possible, and they try to sell it to anybody who comes by and is willing to give them a few bucks. Now, you can get your info removed from data broker websites. The problem is there's hundreds of them. There are new ones popping up all the time, and all the different takedown and opt-out procedures are different. Of course they are. So what DeleteMe has done is they have automated the process of opting people out and getting takedowns for all of the data brokers they can find. And then you can sign up for one service, DeleteMe, and what they do is on an ongoing basis, they are constantly working to keep your data opted out of every data broker they can figure out and that they know about. So it's a great service because you could never do this, like an individual could never do this on their own. But they're going and keeping your data out of all those sites for you. They send you regular reports showing what they found and where they were able to delete it. And it's constantly working for you, monitoring and removing the personal info you don't want to be on those sites. I personally went looking for one of these sites myself a couple of years ago before they were a sponsor. Found DeleteMe. They come recommended by everybody, including the Wirecutter, all sorts of other sites. I was very happy with it. And this was before they were a sponsor. So take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/ATP. and use promo code ATP at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/ATP and enter code ATP at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/ATP, code ATP. Thanks to DeleteMe for sponsoring our show.
You know what's funny about all this is it makes me think about this band, this duo that went storming into popular consciousness like a month ago, maybe a little more. Angine de Poitrine. I probably butchered that pronunciation. Sorry, French people. But and actually the Quebecois, I believe, because I'm pretty sure they're Canadian. But anyways, this is a 2-person duo that dresses up in paper mache like headdresses and black and white polka dot costumes. The guitarist plays a 2-headed bass guitar / regular guitar. They have the most ridiculous costumes. They play microtonal music, which I guess is, hey, let's take notes between regular notes and play those, which in Western music is extremely unusual. This stuff is so weird and so almost off-putting at first because it's so different. But I've been going deep into this band because I'm just fascinated by it. And
I can't wait to see where this is going. I cannot wait.
So the reason I bring this up, were either of you two at all familiar with this
No,
group?
I did look at the video.
Definitely not.
And
Okay.
I can say that watching the video multiple times did not help me in determining where you're going. So I'm fascinated. I'm riveted. Please continue.
Here's where I'm going with this. I think I've been going deep on this band, like I said, and it's very popular to have musicians record reaction videos to this one particular performance, them on KEXP. This is like a half an hour video, and you're not going to offend me if this music is not for you. When I first listened to it, I didn't think it was for me. And then I listened to it again and I was like, well, actually, this is kind of cool. And I kept listening to it and I was like, oh, actually, this is very good. The reason I bring this up is because one of these reaction videos, I couldn't remember which one, so I can't link it, but one of these reaction videos to this band said, you know what this might be in a way, like the popularity of this band and the band itself might be, is this strikes you, or strikes me anyway, as something that is so deeply weird and honestly kind of fucked up that this is not something that an artificial intelligence would ever create. And part of the draw of this band is that it's so weird and so fucked up that an AI would never come up with it. And that's arguably, that's why so many people are drawn to it and interested in it and loving it, because everything about it on paper is wrong. I mean, even if you're, maybe we'll put a link in the chapter art, maybe we won't, but one way or another, if you look at these people and these ridiculous costumes with extremely phallic noses, everything about this is weird. And yet I find joy in it perhaps more than anything else, simply because it's weird and it's not just another form letter with a bunch of headings punctuated with emoji, which, by the way, we got one of those from our school principal a couple of weeks ago. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yep, that's ChatGPT right there. And I think that it's just so weird and so delightful because it's so weird.
I think that's definitely the moment in time we're in, where we mentioned before, like people, are afraid of not being able to recognize AI stuff and aren't sure that they're able to do so. But given the negative sentiment, especially about content generated by AI and all that entails and everything, I think there is currently a sentiment that like a reaction against that.
Exactly.
You said, what is the opposite? What is the opposite of me seeing the clearly AI generated form letter from the school? Because I want to run in the opposite direction of that. Yep. I want to go to something that is clearly human made and all this other stuff, right? And that's definitely kind of the moment we're at, and the backslash we're at. What's the word I'm looking for? Not backslash. Backlash. Yeah, right. But things change so quickly that I'm sure the moment will change, and like the danger of this type of thing is like, that's the thing. I always hear this when people talk about, a computer could never do X. I've been hearing that my whole life. Like, don't say what a computer will never be able to do. It's generally a bad idea. But today, you're probably right that, the reason people can recognize AI stuff because people are, amazing intuitive pattern matchers, and being exposed to enough AI generated stuff with current technology that generated it, you start to say, oh, now I can start to recognize it. The more you see it, the more you're able to recognize it. But of course, things change and the AI changes and they start producing different things or whatever. And there's nothing that says in some many years' time that AI wouldn't produce things even weirder than what a human would create, because who knows? But like, that's the state we're in right now, is that people who are exposed to a lot of this stuff can identify it. And the amazing thing about our brains is very often it's difficult to articulate how it's AI generated. Like you highlighted the emoji and the headings or whatever. But like, yes, there is a certain sameness to it because the pool of training data has a lot of overlaps, and the way these models manifest what they've been trained on, has some sameness to it. But like, it's just sort of like this intuitive sense. But for the fake videos and stuff of like, is this AI generated or is it not? Setting aside things where it's like a fantastical thing that could never happen, where you're like, oh, that's AI generated because that doesn't seem like a real thing that could happen. Just like an AI generated video of a everyday thing is rapidly approaching the point where even the person most well versed in it could not tell on first viewing whether it's AI generated or not. And I feel like that's going to be true about a lot of things going forward. But that doesn't change where we are right now. And where we are right now, I think you're absolutely right, is that people are seeking out things that are the farthest away from what they don't like, whether that means reconsidering their potential future careers to a place where they think, well, AI is not coming for this job anytime in my lifetime because it's just, we're not there yet, or they seem safe for a while, or changing how they think about, what things they want to do in their life. That Marco was talking about, the choices we all make. People are changing those choices based on what they see as this new thing in their life that has upsides and downsides. And previously, before this stuff existed, it wasn't a thing they had to think about at all. But now suddenly there's this thing that exists and it has very big downsides and potentially very big upsides. And I have to now suddenly make decisions about that. Am I going to contribute to this open source project that accepts AI generated code submissions? I'm picking things in the nerd circle because this is the things I see. But like, it's very similar to, am I going to go to Walmart because I don't like how Walmart behaves, but also I don't have a lot of money and Walmart is the closest store to me, right?
Right. Am I going to fly somewhere even though it uses a huge amount of fossil fuel to fly?
Yeah, and this is definitely falls into the carbon footprint trap, which is the concept that energy companies came up with to make individual people feel guilty while they continue to do systemic things to destroy our planet. Like the individual response, like you're not going to cure global warming by like using less water in your shower, right? But systemic rules that say all new power plants that are built can't burn fossil fuels, that will save the planet. Not, I'm going to use a little bit less. And I'm not saying don't conserve, don't recycle, don't blah, blah, blah. But the idea that individuals with individual consumer choices are the thing that's going to save us is a fiction put out by the large companies that actually make a difference because they don't want to be regulated. They don't want to have to pay taxes. They don't want to have to change. They don't want to go out of business. They don't want to disappear. All these reasons. And I think that is true of AI as well. Whereas the idea is like, if a bunch of individuals refuse to work on open source projects that allow AI submissions, then AI will go away. And individuals can make whatever choices they want, but I don't, if your goal is to not have AI code, being submitted to open source things, your individual choice to participate or not in open source projects is probably not going to make that happen unless you're super duper famous and important as a developer or are in charge of a really big project. And the same thing with I'm not going to watch a TV show where I know they used AI in the script writing or whatever, like setting aside your ability to actually accurately know that information because there's, who knows what's actually happening. It's much better to instead say that we should have rules about like creative content and ownership, and we should come up with laws involving what is allowed to be used for training data and what are your rights if your training data is used in a thing. And, the writers guilds and everything to talk about systemic things are currently trying to come up with rules for like human ownership and human authorship and what things are allowed to be eligible for like awards and Oscars and credits and residuals and all this other stuff, because they actually do have organizations that in theory are there to serve the needs of the certain narrow creative communities in certain industries, but whole swaths of the rest of the U.S. public do not have any collective bargaining body or anyone looking out for them. And you would think their ability to vote for representatives would help, but again, see previous conversation about their vote not mattering because the only thing that matters is money, and given a certain amount of money, you can convince people to vote for you. So we're kind of in a bind here with this, but I'm hoping things take a turn for the better if and when we see I love when they use consolidation it's like the gentle phrase. When we see the consolidation in this industry, which means winners, some companies win, some companies lose. Some companies, big fish eats the little fish, and we're left with hopefully a smaller number of companies that are better incentivized to actually do things that people like. Because right now, that is not any of their incentives, and it shows. They are doing things that investors and people who want to fire people like, and everyone else hates.
All right. Thanks to our sponsors this episode, Cotypist, Claude, and DeleteMe. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. One of the many perks of membership is ATP Overtime, our weekly bonus topic. This week on Overtime, we're going to be talking about Google Book and I believe it's Aluminium OS. We're going to talk about that in Overtime. Join to listen, atp.fm/join. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Mastodon, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I spent the whole day doing a very nerdy thing.
Ooh, I love this.
The current version of Overcast transcripts. It is basically, it's rendered as a giant VStack of text nodes in Swift UI. Now,
okay.
I can't believe that even works.
Same.
It does, and yeah, inside a scroll view. So it works. The reason it's done this way is, first of all, it was reasonably simple to code up. The entire app is Swift UI, so I wanted to stick within that. However, for transcripts to work and to follow along with the text, you have to be able to set the scroll position to, as the content is playing, to scroll to certain specific text nodes in it.
I saw some good articles about that recently.
Right, so that can all be done in Swift UI, and it is being done in Swift UI right now. The problem is, to do that, you have to load all of those text nodes and render them all. And that is not great for performance, and that's why if you have a very long episode loaded, especially if you're on an older iPhone, if you tap that mini player, there's now a half-second delay before it actually opens up. And that's because it's rendering all of those text nodes before any part of the now playing screen can show. Now, programmers out there are probably saying, why aren't you using things like lazy VStack? That's a great question. The problem with lazy VStack is that scroll behavior doesn't work anymore, because lazy VStack does not know how tall each paragraph thing of text is until it's rendered. That's kind of why it saves so much time. So lazy VStack does not actually solve this problem for me. It doesn't work for this use case. There are other, like, using list, you can kind of do so, but basically there is no good way for me to do this in SwiftUI. So I had the idea, this should probably be a web view. Now, before you get mad and say web views are terrible, I have a proven history of making good web views in my apps. Instapaper was entirely a web view. Basically, the main content of Instapaper, reading the articles, was a web view. Overcast has used web views since the very beginning to render show notes. If you currently look at show notes on any Overcast, installation, that is a web view. If you look at, of the feedback page, all the other like static pages, like the privacy policy, those are all web views in Overcast. I know how to make good web views. It's a decent amount of work, but it can be done. And over time, it's actually been made easier. So I realized a web view will solve this, because web views are made to render very long content, to render them off the main thread, which SwiftUI cannot and will not do, and to be able to jump to different points in their scroll hierarchy in a performant way, and to know where those points will be.
And do you remember when we had the past discussion when I was dealing with the one complicated view in hyperspace? And I couldn't get the performance because it's like a table view, and I was doing it in SwiftUI and it was just too damn slow for a lot of the reasons that Marco just said, like the pre-computing. I have like 100,000. I have things even longer than transcripts, or maybe not because it's a really long podcast. But and then I was like, well, why can't I get this to perform well? And I tried to do it the Cocoa way, and I was faster with AppKit, but it was still seemed slow. And then I was like, screw it, I'm going to make it a web thing. I remember I had those demo web pages. I feel like, and I don't know, that was like last year sometime. I feel like that has come back again, not just because Marco's talking about it in his app, but there was a article I read from the 17th of May by Artem Lonko, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, where the title is Native All the Way Until You Need Text, which is basically going through the similar thought process of like, so I've got an app and I've got a lot of text. It's a Mac app. I'm going to use NS Text View. It's going to be great. And I can even use TextKit 2, the modern Apple text layout thing, and goes through all the pain of trying to do this and eventually saying, you know what? If you've ever got a bunch of text in an application, just use a web view and like he doesn't go into the detail on this, but like I feel like it is explicable, because if you think about getting back to how many people Apple has on certain teams, how many people do you think are actively working on NS Text View and TextKit and the native text controls? Even in SwiftUI, how many people are working on the specific problem of text layout in SwiftUI versus how many person hours have been put into web rendering engines in the past several decades?
Exactly.
It's not even close. Like, the world has been highly motivated to put just an astronomical amount of person hours into web rendering engines. They are amazing. They're just so good and so fast because there was so much competition and the web is advancing so much that you're like, oh, I want to use native because that's going to be faster. Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true. And it turned out in my case that eventually when I wrangled NS Table View, it became like essentially infinitely fast, and it works the way it's supposed to, because AppKit is amazing once you get it working right. And WebKit did eventually show limits. I forget, it was around like 200,000 or 300,000 rows. Sometimes it would blank out. But considering WebKit was basically brute forcing it and not like reusing cells in the same way, because it didn't like AppKit was able to do it because I'm literally telling it through the API, yeah, reuse the cells, here's the data, blah, blah, blah. Whereas WebKit is just like, I just see a bunch of markup, man. I don't know about cell reuse. This is not being fed by a data source. This is just a giant text file that I need to make something out of. So all this is to say is I am 100% with you, Marco, that WebKit, like using a web page for this is like switching from a technology that like 5 people have worked on a little bit over the past few years to a technology that like thousands upon thousands of people have worked upon for literally millions of hours and continue to work on and continues to be maintained and gets more featureful and more powerful every single year. So fully endorsed.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, so as I was, researching different options and everything, thanks helpfully with the use of AI for some of that research, I quickly realized that, wait a minute, the next feature, so having transcripts out there, I want, there's like 3 major things that I have to do next. Number 1 is improve the alignment around DAI, which I'm currently, I thought
search was going to be number 1.
No. Number 1 is improve DAI alignment because the transcripts are wrong for a lot of podcasts. So that's
wrong schmong.
But the good thing is my current, thanks. My current test flight beta, I think I made pretty great progress in that. Also, thanks to AI, finding that edge case bug in some of my code. But anyway, then I wanted to fix this performance problem because it is pretty embarrassing. Because also keep in mind, like when the highlighted text changes in SwiftUI, there is some, like, which happens, as you play, whichever paragraph is highlighted changes. Now, I'm not changing the overall dimensions of the text by setting it to bold, maybe, because that's the reason I'm not setting it to bold, because that would then reflow everything below it. But SwiftUI still has to do a decent amount of diffing and computation whenever anything in the hierarchy changes to see what changed and what do I need to reload and redraw, and it's probably doing more redrawing than it needs to do. So that's causing performance problems, plus this this initial load performance problem. But then my number 3 thing on my hit list is everybody is requesting some ability to select text and do something, copy it out, whatever. You can't really do good text selection inside a series of SwiftUI text nodes.
That's what that Artem article talks about, I think.
Yeah, so the reality is literally doing my next feature request of having any way to select text will already require me to have switched to a web view anyway. Because web views do that. Like, if you want to have arbitrary text selection that you can select part of one paragraph into other paragraphs and have it cross boundaries of nodes and everything, but not select entire nodes, you basically have to use a web view. Like, that is by far the best option.
I think text selection in web pages is awful, and I fight with it all the time. But at least it's possible. That's the difference. Like, if you're saying, hey, but if you're trying to select text, I'm selecting text in web pages all the time for the purposes of building the internal show notes for this thing. And it's so bad when you're like, oh, why is the thing jumping around and is not letting me select this? And do I have to use the inspector and blah, blah, blah. But at least you can do it. And for the easy case, which I would say the transcripts are an easy case, which is paragraph after paragraph of text. There's no intervening floating ads or sidebars or header graphics or none of that is there. So for just that case, selecting text from a web page works like a dream. But in SwiftUI, as you noted, the current state of their selection technology, especially if you are essentially doing a series of views, one for each paragraph, and you want to select across them, is not great. And by the way, it's not just SwiftUI. If you try to use any of the other native controls, it also is fairly tricky.
Yeah, you have the same problem.
It's like, I don't want to become a framework engineer to work with the type system to do this. I have some text. I want to lay it out. I want to allow people to select it. And I can't believe you go into the top 3 features and still haven't mentioned search. But eventually, somewhere on your list is search. And you know what? That's really easy to do on a web page too. Quote unquote client side with JavaScript. I type a string and it can jump right down to it and it can highlight it. And this is like web technology 101, and it's so easy to do, and it's super fast, and you don't have to worry about it losing the offset and putting you in the wrong, like the thing with the scrolling APIs. We'll put a link to that one in the show notes. I found the article, which is it's from the Nil Coalescing blog about the sad sordid history of SwiftUI APIs for programmatic scrolling. And I can tell you, even the most advanced current one still has tons of jank.
So bad.
Just talk to the people who made Tapestry Icon Factory, which is a giant timeline app, and the amazing Herculean effort they had to do to even hack UIKit to get this the way they wanted it, to have it be stable and to be able to know where they are and go to offsets. And SwiftUI, forget it, was not even close to being able to do it. So this is a hard problem, but it's not a hard problem. Jump to a DOM element.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to do it. They have animations. You can say where on the frame it should be oriented. Like, yeah. So
and it's fast.
And yeah, that's the thing. Like, there's really no significant downside because, as you said, like this stuff is so fast. Yeah, it can be implemented half-assedly, but if you do a little bit of work to polish it, and to prevent it from being a crappy experience, it doesn't take much work to get there, honestly. So that's what I was working, but that's not actually the super nerdy thing that I was talking about earlier. That's just the framework within which I had to do the super nerdy thing, which is, as you know from my transcripts, I have those little music notes. And I have at the top that little banner that says the transcript will contain errors and it has like the little guy falling. Those are SF symbols. I use SF symbols all over my app. This is Apple's, icon library, and they're all over the place in my app. How do you get SF symbols in a web view?
Yeah, have fun with that.
I just pasted SF symbols into my source code today.
Yeah, you can do that actually.
Because I had like a string. I was adding app intents, and you have to pick like the SF symbol, like string name. And I'm like, I'm never going to remember what that string is. Copy, paste. Now I'll remember what it is because it's next to it in a comment.
Yeah. So, because like in the SF symbols app, and you right click a symbol, you have different options. One of them's copy name. One of them's also just copy symbol, because they are just glyphs in the font, but they are like special private glyphs, and they're kind of difficult to access programmatically, and especially in a way that Apple would actually allow in the App Store. And so there really isn't a great way to get SF symbols into a web view, but there are some hacks to do it. And now my web view in Overcast, long ago, many years ago, when podcast ad companies started trying to insert tracking pixels into show notes, Overcast basically made it so that external images and stuff like that will not load. Now, how do you do this in a web view? The web has a thing for that. It's the content security policy. So Overcast WebView has very, very strict content security policy in it, such that only basically the WebView content is heavily filtered for show notes, because that's being externally supplied. It's untrusted HTML. So it is being heavily filtered and then being rendered into a context where it is super locked down by content security policy. So that way, nobody can sneak anything into there that's going to track you without you knowing. That's why I don't load external images by default, and I put those giant placeholders in and saying, do you want to load images from so-and-so.com? And you have to tap each one each time. That's why. It's to avoid all that tracking and everything. And so I had this whole local resource handler that serves external images through a lot of protection and checks and everything like that. So how do I get SF symbols in there? This sent me down as a rabbit hole today. That first I'm like, all right, can I somehow export an SF symbol programmatically as an SVG with vector data, so I can just put it in, because I don't want them to look crappy. And the answer is basically not really. There's a few different methods that both blog posts and forum posts and eventually LLMs have told me about, and they all basically either don't work or have such severe limitations and downsides. One even like Claude generated me an entire PDF to SVG converter to first render this into a PDF graphic context and then export it to SVG, which would have worked but doesn't work because of the way they render the symbols. They're not vectors actually, in that context. So there's I tried all these different ways to do it. Eventually, what I had to do was, I have in my custom URL resource handler through my content security policy stuff, I have an endpoint URL that I can hit that will render the SF symbol to an image. The JavaScript that interprets those nodes in the source file first checks their size with CSS and dynamic JavaScript, stuff like that. So it reads their size and reads their font size around them, and reads their font weight, because obviously SF symbols, they will react to different font weights. So if you have in a bold line, your symbol should render wider, thicker line weight than in a regular line. So all that is being done client side and with JavaScript. It's basically seeing where is this being used. It passes that to the backend. The backend generates the image of the thing, but then it uses this weird CSS trick with shadows or something so that it matches the color of the text around it, because that's how it works in Swift UI. When you use SF symbols, you can use them in text, and they work with the text. They are the text size, they flow with the text, they inherit the text color and the weight, etc. I built all of that today with the craziest JavaScript hacks and CSS hacks and a little bit of help from my friends in the LLM world. But I finally got it working. It took me all day, but now I have SF symbols in a web view, being able to be called up in a secure way through my content security policy, any symbol rendered on any size text with any color, with any font weight. And should I have done all of this? Definitely not. This was a terrible use of my time, but you know what? I work for myself, and I can do stuff like that as a result. And I chose to waste my day doing that, and I feel great. And so I'm glad I did it.
Is there a reason you couldn't just specify use the system font and just show the SF symbol? You know what I mean?
I've tried that, not today. I tried that a while ago, and it didn't work. I forget why.
I've never tried it. I'm just wondering because I know, like, obviously you have the advantages you have going for you is the web rendering engine is WebKit, and you're on a platform where SF symbols exists, and you can specify the system font and CSS. So that would have been a way less work. I thought you were going to end up going to is you ended up making a image with data URLs with the data colon and then like just the base 64 encoded content of the images that you were serving up. But what you did with the images will also work.
I just think it's funny that all of this was because of the falling down guy.
How many symbols are you using?
Right now,
Two?
Yeah, like 3. I mean, I could have just but I also like the reason I wanted to make this generalizable. First of all, obviously I'm a programmer, but and I work for myself. Second of all, I have a mechanism to put like announcements in the app, like remotely server side, so I can say like, hey, here's what's new. And I wanted because I use SF symbols all over the interface, I wanted the ability to include them in those announcements to be like, tap this button, and then in parentheses, show the icon of that button to get to this new feature. So I wanted them to be generalizable, but also safe so that you couldn't just do that from like show notes and do weird things in my app.
What you might have done is guaranteed that the upcoming WWDC will say, and we know a lot of people have wanted to export SF symbols as SVG, and now you can do it.
Yeah, I don't see that happening, but yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised because a lot of people, the problem you're describing, I've seen people asking about and trying to do for a long time. Because for all the reasons you said, that SF symbols are this weird thing where they're a really cool convenience for people writing apps for Apple's platforms, but they're also not images, but they're also not fonts really, but they're animated and can react. Like they're this weird thing, and people always just want to right click one on the app and export it as an SVG, and they're like, why can't I do that?
Well, you can do that. Like you can export vector data. Oh, can you from SF symbols? So the one way I've done that in the past is in Paint Code, like my wonderful programmatic drawing app that I use, Paint Code, which I don't honestly. I think it might be abandoned. It's been awfully quiet recently, but in Paint Code you can export text as vectors. So I just I do the copy symbol thing and paste it in. And then I just convert that to a vector, and then now I have a vector. But that only works like one by one.
But some SF symbols are animated, and you can't really do that. Maybe you can. Can SVGs do animation?
Probably. They can do like all WebKit inside of them. It's one of those like dramatically overspec'd technologies that you can do way too much in it.
Yeah, you can copy as SVG right from the SF symbols app. I just did it.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's how I made my wonderful icon that you loved so much for the Saunter map.
The SF symbols weren't the problem with that icon. It was everything else about it. Where they're placed, what color they were, what color the background was, which symbols you picked, how big they were.
Gracious. It's just so funny to me. Like, I'm not trying to say you did anything wrong. I mean, you nerd sniped yourself, and then you accomplished what you set out to do. But
it was only a day, right?
All of this for what is 2 or maybe 3 SF symbols, at least how it sits right now. That really cracks me up.
But what if I want to change them later?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've already put the XKCD 974 in the chat.
Yep.
Standard protocol.
Of course.